Hey, Gallagher here. I think Gallagher has some great potential as the best SP generator among sustains and a formidable healer, excelling in the debuff niche. But he of course has his problems, which we'll discover today. I'll go through his kit, why it can be insane in the right scenarios, then review his Eidolons for those Acheron or Lawatcher polos. I'll then go through his best builds with some stacked goals and also take a look at his best Lycone options. I'll also note some synergies at the end. Like and sub if you're cool, or even if you're not, comment below if you're pulling for Gallagher, and let's begin. Hey, Guoba is here to talk about today's sponsor, Lilith Games and AFK Journey. AFK Journey is a brand new RPG game with gacha elements and combines idle aspects from their previous game with new gameplay mechanics. It's out right now, and you can download the game for free on iOS or Google Play, or even on PC from the AFK Journey website. You'll travel vast lands as Merlin the Great Wizard, and gather many diverse heroes from different factions along the way. The release offers over 40 heroes for free. You want to mix and match these heroes strategically to defeat all types of content, and you can even team up with friends to fight in dungeons. Combat isn't the only big thing though, as you'll encounter beautifully crafted maps and puzzles along your journey, all whilst diving into the game's lovely and voiced storylines. From playing through the story and all the release events, you can even receive over 200 free pulls. Use my key in the description to get 200 diamonds and a bunch of golden coins, and download now on mobile or PC. Anyway, Guoba's out. Gallagher is a fire abundance and our first of this combo, looking to heal us with his fresh beverages but also by attacking the enemies. Among base stats, his most notable one is his high base HP of 1305. For trace priority, you want to level his talent and his skill for his sustained power, and basic for attack % reduction scaling. His ult doesn't need to be leveled as it only scales the damage. Gallagher has a regular basic attack which doesn't do anything for us, but his enhanced basic attack, Nectar Blitz, will deal 90 toughness damage to one enemy and reduce the enemy's attack by up to 15%. This is pretty big versus single target enemies as it greatly reduces their damage, and versus fire weak, the toughness damage is very strong. His skill, Special Brew, pops a cold one for the boys and heals the target. This does not scale on any attack % or HP % like other healers, it's just a flat, strong heal. This means leveling the trace and having healing bonus % are the most important parts to gaining sustaining power from Gallagher. His ultimate, Champagne Etiquette, has a cost of 110 energy and will hit all enemies for 60 toughness damage. It will then inflict the Besotted debuff onto enemies for 2 turns, and it also enhances his basic attack, so we get that strong Nectar Blitz attack to use on his next turn. His talent brings in his other form of sustain, and that is through hitting Besotted enemies, debuffed from your ultimate. It is another flat heal, and so only scales with outgoing healing and trace level. This Besotted state now also increases the damage taken from break and break darts, giving some offensive boost for the team and even helping out his own damage due to his high toughness damage. Also, since he applies Besotted before he attacks during his ultimate, this means his ult will self-heal him greatly. Finally, his technique attacks the enemy and applies his Besotted mark for 2 turns to all enemies. Unfortunately, enemies are very fast and will cycle 1 turn of this debuff off at the start of the fight. Before we move on to when to ult on Gallagher, we have to check out his traces. His A2 increases his outgoing healing by 50% of his break effect up to 75%. You'll want 150% break effect if you want to max it out. Either way, this is a massive healing boost for him, and his kit lets him run offensive break stats with defensive main stats to be a tanky, damaging healing beast. His A4 advances his action by 100% after using his ultimate, and this is why I think he has so much potential. This will, in 99% of cases, make his next turn start immediately after ulting. This means in the scenario where he never needs a skill, he has better SP generation than even Lawatcher, as he'd have the same amount of turns as Lawatcher plus 1 turn for every ultimate. His sustain isn't that good though from my testing, so you'll need a skill, but if your team is super strong, then you could probably abuse this SP generation. Finally, his A6 restores HP for all allies, scaling off his talent's heal when he attacks Besotted enemies with his Nectar Blitz enhanced basic, meaning an ult into basic is a very nice emergency heal. Gallagher will gain 18% HP, 28% F-res, and 13.3% break effect from trace bonuses, which are all very strong for him. So when do we want to ult? If you waste your Besotted debuff duration, then you lose massively on emergency sustain, as outside of Gallagher's single target skill, you'd have no way of healing yourself. In any case, do not ult at the start of your turn outside of niche cases, or you'll waste the advance forward. Now the debuff has a 2-turn duration at E0, so you don't want to ult before your main enemy or enemy's move, you'll want to ult after. Though even if you are just before enemies' actions, you'd have no choice but to ult if your team is super low. You also don't want to ult if your Gallagher turn is near, seeing as you'd waste the 100% advance forward. Instead, take your turn, use an action, then ult if anything. As for the following enhanced basic, I would only use it if your whole team is moderately low, referring to skill once instead to preserve the strong AoE talent proc. Now let's check out his Eidolons, which are pretty bonkers for him. His E1 regenerates 20 energy at the start of the battle, making him start at 75 energy upon entering MOC now. It also gives him 50% airfres, and you read that right, you now just have 50% airfres as a bonus permanently at E1, which is pretty insane. That's 78% airfres at E1 with no substats, only requiring 6 airfres subs to be immune to every debuff in the game on Gallagher. His E2 is another big one, giving him cleanse on his skill, which is much needed for sustain to function in more content than usual. It also gives the ally a 2-turn 30% airfres buff, which doesn't stop debuff chances on DPS that much, but it is always nice to have. As for supports who do build airfres, this is a massive help. His E4 is again a big one. The besotted state from the ult now lasts 3 turns. You still want to be smart about when to ult, but you now have 3 enemy turns to abuse it rather than 2, making him much better into fast enemies. Finally, his E6 gives him offensive power in the form of a small break effect boost, but a substantial break efficiency boost. Those big toughness hits from earlier will now do a little bit extra. It does seem weird when abilities are separated, but considering an ult into enhanced basic, you're doing exactly 180 toughness damage, which is major. So let's check out his builds, first off his relics. The natural route would be to recommend the full break set for maximizing his break effect passive. However, outside of one rotation, the energy doesn't matter, and we'd much rather have the speed from 2-piece hack space. 16% break is also weaker than the outgoing healing from Passerby, so in order of 2-piece combos, we'd go with Hackerspace, Passerby, and any break 2-piece. Full Thief is still fine of course, and I'll show a rotation with it later on. Full Passerby also works if you want that skill point specifically. For Planars, we'll opt for Broken Kill for ally buffing, and this passive is immediately fulfilled by E0 Gallagher. The 10% F-res makes our E1 Gallagher reach 88% F-res. Fleet buffs allies too if you have leftovers, and Talia can help you reach 150% break effect if you're struggling with stats, but make sure you hit the 145 speed in that case. Finally, Penacony is nice with fire DPS, and the 5% energy can come in handy in some cases. For main stats, we'll opt for Healing Body, Speed Boots, HP or Death Orb, and an Energy Rope. Not really any changes you want to make. Healing Body is the best you can do for him, and Speed Boots and Energy Rope are far too invaluable. But now let's check out his stat goal. You'll want to hit 150% break effect as a final goal, but you'd only lose out on Healing Boost, so it's not 100% necessary. You'll also want high speed following normal speed breakpoints. A good base point is 134 as usual, but he's not a DPS so it isn't required, and I would go faster anyway. You want 4k HP, 1k defense, and finally 22% F-res with his E1 and traces, bringing him up to 100% for full debuff immunity. Now for Lycans we have a few options. If you want pure healing and comfort, then Horhor's signature is very nice for him. He doesn't have the best emergency healing, but her Lycan gives a bunch of it. The energy is also very useful for certain energy rotations we'll see later. What is real is his signature free light cone from the Forgotten Hall. It gives a massive break effect boost, which is always nice for his conversion passive and damage. Then when he basic attacks, he will heal himself a bunch. Combined with his F-res buff at E1, high base HP, and no need to build a certain stat for healing, Gallagher can be immortal and fully focus on healing allies with this cone. Quid pro quo as usual is great if you're tuning energy rotations specifically for it. Multiplication is massive for even more SP generation over a fight, considering with every light cone you will probably need to use his skill. You'll be taking so many turns, which is nice for outpacing enemies and healing your team. Just be careful of the weak stats, and be careful with his ult considering he will be overtaking enemies. Finally, post-op will be necessary if you want certain rotations from him, and Fine Fruit can be used in certain fast ultimate attacks for low cycle clears, or generally quality of life rotations that can kickstart runs. Now onto his pros and cons. First, his healing has a high base value and scales off nothing, so you have building freedom. Next, he has high toughness damage, which can be a considerable help into fire weak stages. Breaking enemies is more survivability after all. Also, his A4 granting him 100% advance is major for clutch SP generation and heals. He also has 2 debuffs synergizing with the debuff-oriented units we've been seeing a lot more of recently. He also scales very well with his E1, E2, and E4. He also has the best SP generation among sustains in the game if you have a high investment team and don't need to skill on him. Finally, he has nice sustained damage if you do end up breaking with him. For cons, my major problem with him is that his emergency heal is tied to enemy turns due to his debuff. In the case of those 190 speed enemies, you're going to have a real problem. Even versus 158.4 speed enemies, if you don't have E4, it is tricky to solo sustain with him. That ties into the fact that his E1, E2, and E4 are major for him and his sustained power, and whilst it's a pro, it's also a con for unlucky pullers. His 150% break effect passive may also be hard to max out if not using his signature, and considering he needs an energy rope. Finally, due to his strategic healing timings and when to ult, I wouldn't say he's equipped to fight autoplay as well as most sustains. Now for energy rotations, let's check out a few. A standard Gallagher rotation will probably see you using 1 skill per 4 turns, giving him a 4-turn rotation and generating 0.5 SP a turn with just an energy rope. A 4-turn rotation going fully SP positive will need you to use post-op S2 or higher, or Horhor's light cone with an energy rope. Just be careful of having no skills used in 3 turns. For 3-turn ultimates, Luwatch's light cone versus 3 enemies with lower SP generation can niche you one, but I don't recommend it. The other option is post-op S5 with an energy rope and a 5% energy planar, and 2 thief procs, which only happens into Fire Week. I also don't recommend this. So realistically, he's hitting a 4-turn ult unless you consider getting hit a bunch. For a fast ultimate, we have 2 possibilities, and we require his E1. First, you can skill with an energy rope and post-op S1 or Horhor's signature, or you can abuse Fine Fruit and basic attack. This can be very nice for kickstarting Acheron's ultimate generation with his instant debuffs, and Fine Fruit is also used for kickstarting Pella and Silverwolf's energy. So finally, let's check out some synergies. First, his debuffs make him a great and free-to-play friendly sustain for Acheron. His ult is a debuff, his enhanced basic gives a debuff too. These are also in quick succession with his A4, allowing for a clutch Acheron ultimate if you are sitting at 7/dreams. His high toughness damage means he could potentially score some breaks in Fire Week, allowing for some dreams generation on turns without debuffs. Dr. Ratio can use Gallagher in a somewhat similar fashion, with Gallagher's Besotted debuff helping Ratio swap to other targets, whilst keeping high damage and follow-up chance. They are also both hard. Technically, Break DPS can use his talent's break damage increase, but it's not too much of a bonus that you'd need to pull him for them. Finally, SP intensive DPS can use him if your team is very invested. Crushing the enemies with damage means less need to skill on Gallagher, which in turn gives him the best SP generation among sustains in the game. So I hope that helped any Gallagher enjoys, and of course any Acheron enjoys wanting to use him as a sustain. I think he has great potential, so let me know below how good he has been on your team. Thanks to my awesome YouTube members, thanks for watching, and have a Guoba day.